All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there. And as always, a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here. And look, if we're dropping a pod on a Saturday after a busy week of midweek fixtures, Chelsea getting and staying in second position in the Premier League table, it's because we're putting out a match preview. That's right. Chelsea playing a mid-table 10th place Tottenham. The supporters absolutely crumbling at the moment. The mates and the mate energy from Ange very low, at its lowest it might ever have been for this Tottenham side. And it is an opportunity for Chelsea to pick up another crucial 3 points to continue a strong start to the month of December, where there's still plenty more fixtures left to play. And we're going to get into exactly how they've been playing with a lot of recent thoughts from the Bournemouth match that took place recently and the success they did not put together in that one. We'll also chat through a little bit of the considerations that Enzo Maresca is going to have to make, and he definitely has more positive decisions that he can make versus Ange and Tottenham. And then we'll get into some of our predictions. But again, it's a match preview, so it's always one that we do with Sam. And Sam, we've been having this conversation about the fact that Chelsea in second position as we get into this match, crucial in the title race, a title race that Chelsea, just by proxy of being in second place and having 28 points and a plus 16 goal difference, are mathematically in, and we cannot rule them out. It's an exciting time to do a match preview.
It is, absolutely. And I've always been a very optimistic individual, but I will keep my hopes bottled for now. We are not Arsenal. We will not rejoice, being second place in December. We will wait till May and see how the picture looks then. Hopefully, it'll be as rosy, even better, possibly. But yeah, it's a great time to be a Chelsea fan. I watch the games for the second time now without all that grudge and vengeance that I have from 2 years ago. So it's nice to go in with like an open mind, with happy thoughts and lots of goals to look forward to. But also before we get into the pod, just wanted to say congratulations. That Nkunku pick was spot on for the scorer in the last preview pod. So well done. And I will be asking you to make another prediction today.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, I think the easy prediction will be Nico Jackson to score against Spurs because he just seems to like it. And, we love a striker. We love an individual leaving the line who likes to score in London derbies, in big stadiums against
But
historic
that's too
rivals.
easy.
I know it
That's
is.
much too
I know
easy.
it's too easy,
No, no,
but
listen.
it is
No, Dad,
absolutely the right pick.
no, you have to choose a number from 1 to 3. Let's make it more interesting.
Fair. Very, very, very fair. I appreciate that. I'm just trying to follow in your footsteps, Sam, because you've gotten so much right in these last couple of pods that I felt like I was holding this back. So wanted to make sure I was keeping up my end of the bargain here. And I mean, let's just kind of talk about the fact that Spurs supporters are not in a good spot. I mean, I did, as we were chatting through in our WhatsApp group after the Bournemouth match, I did go to their subreddit. I was looking at the post-match game thread, and then one of the top comments was it was a bad day to have eyeballs, which tells you exactly how they feel, maybe as a supporters group watching their games right now. I'd love to get just an update or a snapshot on how good, average, poor you think their overall play is before we talk about maybe just their recent run of fixtures, any injuries that they're going into, just your snap feeling before we get into the specifics with the style of play and the weaknesses and the strengths.
I mean, I think it's like peak Tottenham Hotspur because I don't think even the fans know what they're going to get on the day. So it is quite unpredictable. And I say that with a little bit of respect as well because we know what they did to Man City, and we all know that Man City's been on a bad run, but to still go to the Etihad and absolutely crunch into them the way that they did, it takes a good team to do that. So there are some extremely good highs, but there are equally horrible lows, and we saw that against Bournemouth. Fans getting into an altercation with their manager. Manager made some very questionable comments about the club's culture and just how the sentiment is last season. So it does look like it's souring. It's a relationship that sort of is already at breaking point, and I think that essentially sums up their issues. It's there's a divide between the fans and the club and the ownership. So yeah, it's just I'm always wary of a wounded animal, Dan. So I will keep this quite realistic, quite pragmatic. I wouldn't just push in and say, oh, we're going to demolish them. It's still a pretty good Tottenham side with some very very good strengths that we'll talk about. But overall, I think you should definitely keep an arm's distance when choosing what to do with them.
Well, and again, just to look back across a couple of those last run of fixtures they had, it was a 1-0 loss to Bournemouth in the midweek. Could have been worse for them, to be fair. It was I think, one of the highest, or if not the highest, XG that Bournemouth has ever recorded in a Premier League game. And that tells you something. They did have the 1-1 draw against Fulham. They had a 2-2 draw in the Europa League against Roma. You did mention the Man City game, the 4-0 victory they had there, but that's kind of the anomaly match out of this last run. If you go back one or two more, Ipswich Town beat them 2-1 and Galatasaray beat them 3-2. So very much a scenario where they have not been winning. They've either been drawing or losing to teams that you would imagine in a typical calendar year. A Tottenham team would not have a problem with an Ipswich. A Tottenham team would not have a problem with a Bournemouth, would not have an issue, maybe even with a Roma or a Galatasaray. So this is very much, I think, an aberrant run of, or maybe the reality of who this Tottenham team is at the moment and where they're at as a club. I mean, they get the conversation going as supporters around the lack of support that Levy and the board have provided to Ange in the summer. It feels like that they're a threadbare side when it comes to who can be available for them. Record in the Premier League right now, 6-2-5 on 20 points. That is not super ideal for them when you think about it at this point in time. They have scored 28 goals, so they're averaging 2.15 per game. They have allowed in 14 goals, so 1.08 allowed per game is a plus 14 goal difference. So very interesting to see that when you look at this table, they're in the mid-table section of the Premier League, but they have a positive goal difference. Sorry, it's actually 13 after the match, this most recent match. Above them, Bournemouth is a 2, Aston Villa is a -1, Forest is a 0. You look beneath them, Brentford is a 1 goal difference, Newcastle is a 0 goal difference, Man United is a +2 goal difference. They are one of the few teams with a double-digit goal difference, and yet every other team with the double-digit goal difference right now in the positive is third, second, or first. So, I mean, how much of this is just they've come alive in a couple of key games, Sam, to deliver, and really have struggled with some of maybe the basics in other games where they just are not showing up with a level of regularity?
Yeah, I mean, the recent form speaks for itself. I think there's one win in the last six games, and Tottenham have been prone to this, Dan, where last season they were coasting towards top four and it looked like it was sealed up, like absolutely done and dusted. And then they went on a run where they had to face I think three or four sides in the top six, and they lost all of them. And suddenly Villa took over, leapfrogged them and just ran away with that UCL place. So it's been similar now, where there were certain concerns in terms of how they would rectify issues from last season, and with the injuries now popping up, with a lot of tactical concerns not being sort of stitched up by Ange. It's just the same old story. So I think it is a repeat pattern. It's a chronic issue rather than one that you expect to magically sort of go away in time. So it's a good time to face them. I'll put it kindly. I think if you want to go away at White Hart Lane and face a Tottenham side, then I would definitely pick this particular time. So hoping that we can press our initiative, and if we do the right things, and these are very straightforward, basic things. If we do the
Sure.
basics right, then I expect us to go away with a good result.
And so, I mean, if you look at the fact that they do have a lot of players unavailable for this one, Van de Ven, Odebert, Richarlison, Moore, Vicario, Davies, obviously the unfortunate incident with Bentancur and his suspension that he's currently serving, and Romero may or may not be available for this one. You do have only two situations where, Chelsea with Reece James and West Fofana not available for this one. So, very much a situation where you would rather be Enzo Maresca with the Chelsea team play the way that they are and the availability of the players you have than Ange and Big Ange and his big list of players that are currently unavailable. But I want to get into the style of play. I want to start talking about where those weaknesses are, because it feels like those are going to be a lot more of the conversation in this one, getting in Maresca's problems to solve and then some of our predictions. But we'll do that after our first ad break. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Okay, Sam. So walk me through the style of play. I mean, this was a team that played one of the most ridiculous high lines I think we have ever seen as Chelsea supporters, and we loved every moment of it. They want to keep on running that back in this game. Very happy for it. Would be absolutely fantastic. But have they learned any lessons from last year in the way that they're playing? And it feels like the answer is no.
And you're absolutely right. To be short and sweet, no, I think there are still some grading issues in terms of can they adapt when conditions are not right, and they tend to make the same mistakes even when they're missing. It's not a deep squad, then there clearly isn't a luxury a lineup in terms of talent for them to pick from when a couple of their first choice guys go missing. But yeah, I think they just haven't learned to be resourceful enough, in my opinion. So the high line is still going to be there, and it is because Ange wants his teams to be proactive. They are, like, we will talk about this in the tactics section next. They are the most aggressive pressers in the league in terms of PPTA. They don't want you to rest, and to do that, they have to push their back line up and make sure that it accentuates what they're trying to do. But there's no adapting, there's no compromise on those principles. It's admirable, but it's also equal parts stupid, in certain phases of play. So yeah, pretty much going to be the same weaknesses as last time.
All right. So, just in that style of play, is there anything else you want to call out in terms of specifics about just how they're setting up, how it looks, and the ball is in possession, out of possession, and maybe even some of the things that you like or could be improved upon if they actually committed to doing it over the full 90?
So let's start off with the basic shape. So this season in particular, like every time they've come up against a 4-2-3-1, they've gone with a 4-3-3. So I think we expect that to happen next. They've used the back three, I think, against Crystal Palace, but almost always it's going to be a 4-3-3. So I think Maresca can definitely prep for that. Out of possession, there is a 4-4-2 and mostly a 4-1-4-1, where the three-man midfield sort of shifts. Yves Bissouma becomes the lone pivot, and then they've got Papsar and James Madison just ahead. And the entire goal is to just shut off spaces, have very, very compact lines, and then try to win the ball in those central areas and basically break forward. So the numbers, Dan, in terms of counterattacks or goals from counterattacks, they lead the league with 9 goals. So that's exactly going to be the game plan. Like, use those quick players, use the likes of Kulusevski and Brennan Johnson and Heung-min Son, and give them the space they need to essentially thrive. But the narrow shape is definitely something that they've worked on. They want to squeeze you in into that tight space and then move out wide as soon as possible. We also know that from last season they like inverting both their fullbacks. So Pedro Porro and Destiny Udogie will essentially invert into a box midfield, and they will try to create issues. And when that happens, it's usually like underlaps and trying to hit the box and accurately provide some cutbacks for midfield runners arriving late. So it's going to be quite, an interesting attacking sort of setup to come up against. It's going to be a good test. There are some very interesting relationships between the number eight and the inverted fullbacks as always. So it's definitely going to be like a lot of changing, shifting, moving, which we'll definitely have to be well prepared for. So the next is probably going to be the defense. I would say that they are. We will talk about the injury issues later on. They are lacking quality. Even Romero, who's been essentially their best centre back, has looked rusty. He's looked out of sorts at times, and with Van de Ven out with injury, they're probably going to have to go with Radu Dragosin, who's the only fit centre back, and then pair him up with one other person. They had Ben Davies, who's a fullback essentially, playing in central defence. Lost him to injury, and they had to play young Archie Gray, who's a central midfielder converted into a fullback and then pushed into centre back. So if Romero's not fit, then, like you mentioned, if he does not pass that late fitness check, then um, I genuinely assume it's going to be a bit of a slaughter in terms of coming up against Palmer and Jackson. So yeah, I think that covers defense, and we will take it in the midfield because I think it's quite a convoluted section. But you mentioned Bentancur is banned, so I do see it going maybe like the conventional way in terms of Yves Bissouma going to be, the defensive pivot, the anchor, and Papsar has essentially been the box to box threat, somebody who covers great ground and is able to offer a lot of multi phase issues. So he's definitely going to start. And James Madison has sort of like figured his mojo after a little bit of a lull last season, scored twice on his birthday against Manchester City. So he's definitely going to be in those spaces trying to create, trying to orchestrate and pick those gaps. So yeah, in terms of just attacking issues, Dan, I think it's going to be quite intriguing because I think it's a side built to score more rather than rely on being compact and very solid through the middle and stop goals. But yeah, I think that's what Madagascar's game plan will be, trying to figure out how to blunt the threat and essentially go from there.
And I think like a lot of that's going to end up coming down to how the right side of their attack situates against the left side of our defense. And, I think Kulusevski is definitely a player that they'll want to be keeping an eye on in addition to Johnson. I mean, we talked a little bit about the defenders and, they do like to use their fullbacks in the attacking element here. It feels as if they're in a stage where they are similar in some ways to how Chelsea want to really involve the entirety of a side to push forward and to make it compact for the defense and force a volume of shots where they possibly can. Maybe not as effective as Chelsea have been, but I mean you're not a plus 14 goal difference, in again, and then winning games against teams like Man City if it doesn't come off sometimes. So it feels like there is things that, or there are things that may give Chelsea challenge on the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And we mentioned on the Villa podcast that there are two sides, that love playing through the center. So almost 41% of our attacks come through the center. You have a very central dominant team. It's the exact opposite with Spurs. It's a side that is second worst in the Premier League in terms of attacks coming through the center. Only one fourth, so 25% of the attacks emanate in that central zone. It's going to be 38% on the left hand side and the rest on the right hand side. So that's something that will be very interesting to see. You mentioned the right side particularly being potent. We've talked about Kulusevski, so he ranks number 5 in the Premier League for chances created this season. He's just 3 short of Palmer, so the impact is there to see. Him and Spurs' other right wing option, Brennan Johnson, both rank in the top 2 for box touches for Tottenham Hotspur. So both of them quite carry heavy, will be looking to breach the box and offer either cutbacks or shots from there. So um, that's what makes the right side a little bit of a nasty business to come up against. Pedro Porro, who I was scouting very heavily as a Reece James replacement when he was at Sporting, very attacking player as well. He's got some great cutbacks. He can also strike the ball from distance, as he did for Spurs against Manchester City in that 4-0 win. So he's going to be again pushing forward, trying to create issues inside the box. And these three players then, Pedro Porro, Brennan Johnson, and Kulusevski, account for 37% of Spurs' shots this season. You do not have the same dynamics on the left hand side. I feel like Heung-min Son is either declining or the certainty is that his numbers are just flat compared to previous seasons, and he does look like physically maybe sort of hitting that mark where it becomes difficult to maintain that electric zip that he had before. He doesn't look as stern and reliable as he did when he was running in behind defenses and getting 1v1. I've barely seen him 1v1 this season. So maybe not as potent on the left, but the right is definitely something that we have to keep an eye on. And something they did very well against Manchester City was just stretching the back four and trying to make runs in behind the last line. So the first goal happens because both the wingers are putting Manchester City's back four to extremes, and Dominic Solanke has taken the attention of both centre backs, and James Madison essentially makes this run from midfield. Rico Lewis tracks him midway and says to Stones, like, take him. He's running into the box, and Stones has like one eye on Solanke, so he just refuses to do it. And Madison goes and scores the goal. So they've also got that potent midfield running threat. Madison does it. Sar is also pretty good, but doesn't score often. So another, I would say, dimension of threat that has to be accounted for. And like I mentioned before, Dan, like they're very, very aggressive. I think that's going to be a good test, especially because we're missing West Fofana, who I think has been growing in confidence in terms of carrying the ball, being reliable under pressure. So you've got to be careful. I think they will target Badiashile because he does have, has had those little moments where he's given the ball away very cheaply and it's come back to bite us. But I'm really rooting for him. Hopefully, this will be a good test and there's enough confidence in there to, play his way out of trouble. But it's a high risk, high reward maneuver here where you would expect Spurs to come at you and try to win the ball in those areas. You mentioned the Bournemouth match. They are also extremely good pressers, but I think what they did very well was they just didn't want to engage Spurs there. Every time the ball was with Kepa, he went long as often as possible. Didn't want to start building up. Didn't want to invite that level of pressure. I think we will go the exact opposite way. We will try to provoke. We will try to get them to press and weave through the middle, and hopefully you'll find some joy there.
Well, when we speak about joy, I think the joy is also going to be the things that are not going well for Spurs when they enter into the match. I mean, we mentioned it at the top, but they definitely have a lot of injuries that they're dealing with. So you have some deputizing that's taking place across multiple positions, which is going to potentially create some unbalanced pairings or partnerships across, both the midfield and also the defense for them, which I think then has a knock-on effect to how they're actually executing their defense. And I think they're maybe also struggling with some of the challenges of that the Maresca had been kind of rightfully or wrongly had fingers pointed at him earlier this season on how do you get your best attackers to work with one another to be successful, to contribute at the right level. It feels as if they do have things that are going to cause them problems, and things that will be plainly obvious to see during this match between Chelsea and Tottenham.
Now, you talked about the injuries. I think that's going to be the most damning red flag there for them. It's just lacking quality all across the defense, having to figure out what they're going to do with the other centre back partner if Romero isn't fit. So I would say if the team sheet looks a little light in that regard, then obviously it's going to be a massive confidence boost for us. But you obviously want to face a strong Tottenham side, so there are no excuses. But that's definitely the biggest red flag for me there, the injuries. The second I would say, Dan, is something that happens with 4-3-3 is when you've got two number eights that want to do the more adventurous bit of the midfield role, try to get into advanced areas. Like Salah wants to press, he wants to win the ball high. Madison obviously wants to be in around the box where he can pick passes and make things happen. you often have this phase in the game where maybe it's the game state, like you're losing or you're trying a little too hard to push forward, and a 3-5 easily becomes a 3-1-6, and at times it becomes a 2-1-7, and that's what happens with Spurs. Like there's very little accountability in transition. Their rest defense looks absolutely disastrous. They leave Udogi back there. He's somebody who looked pretty poor in terms of recovering against Semenyo and Bournemouth's runners on the right hand side. So it's not really a defense that looks well equipped or has enough support to deal with defensive transitions. So I think if there are moments where they go up for a corner or they're attacking in a sustained spell of pressure, if you can find the right pass centrally against their 3-1 against Bissouma, then you can create a lot of trouble for the individuals as well as the unit. So and that's something that I will be keeping an eye on. Both their fullbacks also love to underlap, so they will get into advanced positions. And a lot of joy, Dan, comes from when you can pick a pass on the same side of the underlapping fullback. So if Poro goes and you win the ball inside your own box, go to Poro's side, like our left, their right hand side, like try finding a wide runner in those areas, get 1v1 with the centre back and try to make things happen. So I think tactically that's something that you have to keep in mind in terms of how you break forward and how you execute counters. And third, Dan, is I don't want to say it's like a weakness, but I think it's definitely sort of keeping them from finding just the most useful attacking combination. So what's happened is they haven't figured out how to use Kulusevski and Brennan Johnson because both prefer the right hand side. And the left hand side obviously belongs to the captain Heung-min Son, and they can't drop him. And both Kulusevski and Johnson can only play well on the right hand side. So what they've done at times is they've sort of moved Kulusevski to the right-sided number 8. But then again, the other problem is then you have to drop either Madison or Papsar. So what exactly are you going to do? And Johnson's been he's had an incredible run of form where I think he went 7 games in a row where he scored for club and country. And, it was very, very hard to drop him. So I think that's going to be very, very interesting to see if maybe like somewhere down the game they go for a more extreme option. I think that makes the game more open for us, so we might be able to pick them off quite easily. But haven't been able to find out what the ideal balance is in attack. Um, Maybe the next weakness we can talk about is that they are a possession intensive side. So when they're trying to play out the back with the injuries that they have, with Vicario out, with the goalkeeper sort of not, being able to play out the back well, it can be an issue. So Bournemouth's goal, for example, the one that was ruled out for offside came from Fraser Foster trying to play out, and a pass was played into the defensive third, one back, and then boom, scored by Evan Nielsen. But unfortunately, there was an offside there. So it maybe pressing them will yield a lot of incentive for us at this point. I wouldn't normally advise it because they do look like they're comfortable playing out from the back. But in this game, I think it makes sense to go very hard on them. And set pieces then also look quite shaky. They've conceded, I think, 5 or 6 now from set pieces this season. Low aerial win percentage, also missing two very sturdy centre backs in the air. So I wouldn't bet against a set piece goal this time also. Last time said that it would happen, and maybe this time I probably might repeat that prediction and see how it goes. And yeah, Dan, I think that's basically it. I would say, try to pressure those central players. I think because of transitions, because of how weak they look centrally, you can 100% put them under a lot of pressure if you go very quickly through the center when you're breaking. Especially like certain players like East Basuma has a habit of picking up an early yellow card. So you have to try and get him to make that ugly tackle. You have to get Radu Dragostin to come out of his line. He's also looked very suspect at
Sure.
times. So yeah, and he's maybe under a lot of pressure now as the only established centre back in the back line. So If you want to, get at them tactically, I think the easiest thing to do is, if you're playing against their 4-1-4-1 and you have a box midfield in those areas, then your pocket players should be trying to swamp Bissouma as much as possible. Try to get Dragosino or his centre-back partner to step out and make a mistake and get into those areas where you can get behind the defensive line against one centre back. If you can do that, then I think it's going to be Palmer and Jackson finding a way in somehow. So that's going to be my prediction there. Like a goal coming from the center by Dragusin stepping up or his centre back stepping up on Jackson or Palmer, and somebody gets played in behind.
You're the player who's become so good at making a prediction that you have to get very narrow and very specific to up the level of challenge you're setting for yourself. And I appreciate that. And I think the listeners
Hmm.
will as well. Let's take our last ad break. When we get back, you can throw some questions my way about the issues that Enzo Maresca is going to have to solve. And then we can lock in some predictions. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. All right, Sam, time to flip the script. Time to ask me a couple questions, the things that you think Enzo Maresca is going to have to take into consideration as he gets ready for this weekend derby against Tottenham.
Yeah, I think the first question I would want to ask you is, what's your wing pairing for Spurs? Obviously, Sancho got a goal. Felix looked pretty good despite his two missed chances. What does your left wing, right wing look like?
Ooh, I think it's a very interesting question. I think if you feel like Nani Madueke came off early and that he had and could have had an even more impactful game that he delivered, you might want to see if you can continue the heat, continue the fire, continue some excellent action there. And then I think, Neto not really being involved feels like it's a Neto and Madueke situation for the wings and attack. That's my guess in this moment, and I think it's the Jackson and Cole situation in the 9 and 10 respectively to finish up our attack in this one. But that's what my gut is telling me.
I have absolutely the same thoughts as well. I think, like we mentioned, the inverted fullbacks pushing up. If you want to exploit people 1v1, then that's the solution you go for. You go for your best two 1v1 wingers and try to get at the centre back. So spot on then. Like, well done. I think that's
Well,
that's my answer as
again,
well.
the only thing I'm hoping to do is make sure that I keep pace with you, and if I do, I think the listeners will give me some
You're very
positive
kind.
credit there.
No, you're too kind, genuinely. But second question then would be, did you believe that Lavia was rested or was he benched against Southampton? And does he make your starting 11 in this one?
Oh, that's not fair. I think I don't want to speculate on whether or not a player was benched for reasons, non-footballing reasons. I would rather just assume that they were actually injured and allow that to be the appropriate narrative. Things are going too good for Enzo Maresca. I mean, he's getting the results. He's rotating players well. The team seems happy. You have wonderful moments like Jadon Sancho getting his first Chelsea goal for his boyhood club. I don't want to assume that there was something that happened that made it so the player made themselves unavailable rather than an injury or another situation outside of their control making it a decision from Resca. So I'm not. I don't want to go down speculation road in that regard, but hopefully it was not a disciplinary or a personnel management issue.
No, definitely. I think my question was more sort of, did you believe that Enzo Fernandez has leapfrogged him as the PL
Oh,
sort of
okay.
option? Yeah. So, like, do
Ooh,
you believe? Yeah, it's come to a point now where he hinted at this in the press conference as well, saying, Enzo had a moment, and now maybe he's starting to see where it's hard to ignore that, like 9 goals and assists contributions in just what 5 games. You
yeah.
can't drop that kind of heat. You genuinely cannot.
Well, and I think then, he also mentioned this in the press conference too. We've talked about the fact that Caicedo at a right back situation, which we talked about during the Enzo Maresca, the highly touted, well listened to, one of our most popular episodes of last year, according to Spotify, the Enzo Maresca deep dive about Moises Caicedo potentially playing in a right back situation. It did come to fruition.
The amount of hate I got for that. genuinely still haunts me this day. People were like, "Why are you giving this tactical platform?" And I just kept quiet. I was like, "I'll be back in 5 months, and we'll see who's right and who's wrong, Dan."
Oh,
But
we made the right
oh my
decision
god.
to platform and in that regard, justified fully, underline, full stop, send it. I think that creates the avenue though for getting Enzo into the side and also keeping
Mhm.
Caicedo on the pitch. So like there is some magic here that we're starting to develop. It does, I think, create some challenges though from a defensive pairing standpoint. And I think without Wesson, it is asking a lot from Badiashile if he's the one who plays next to Colwell in this match. It is a gamble. You are gambling that you are going to be comfortable enough and your one-on-ones defensively are going to come to fruition. You're not going to have goalkeeper errors, which again, we're getting Sanchez in this game, as Enzo Maresca highlighted right after the match, in case anybody had been wondering if Jorgensen had done enough to feature in 2 Premier League matches in a row. So I don't think, I think it is more likely that you see both of them than, but with Moises Caicedo dropping into the defense as an inverted fullback, than potentially
Mhm.
seeing just 2 of the midfielders that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, that's quite fair. I think he likes the pairing. He likes Caicedo Lavia as the more physical pairing, and uh, having seen Gusto and Cucurella being tried in those attacking 10 spots and not really coming good, I think he's realized now that if somebody can offer you that level of goal assist threat from at least the number 10 position, then it has to be Enzo. Somebody who can also press well, somebody who's very good between lines, he's exceptional under pressure. Might as well play all three together. If Caicedo has to play right back, so be it. The guy's played 10 for Ecuador, he plays 8, he plays 6. Why not make the best out of it and figure out if you can go from there?
And a question as we kind of go into predictions before we get that, like, where are you at on your player of the season rankings, like 1 through 3? It is, because we've had a little bit of conversation on Nico's involvement. We've talked a little bit about Cole just continuing to pop up in every moment when he needs to, even if he's not dropping the a full 8.5, 9 every match, that he is still good enough in those very tiny moments to make a massive difference. And then Caicedo just in multiple positions now, in midfield, in a midfield advanced position, in a midfield defensive position, in a 2, in a 3, in a very lying CDM capacity, in a right back capacity. Like, he is doing it across so many different positions. What's your 1, 2, 3? And are those the 3 for you?
Yeah, I think you sort of put it perfectly for me. I think it's neck and neck between Moises Caicedo and Cole Palmer. You genuinely cannot do without any of those contributions, and both have proved that despite added pressure, one has the price tag, the other has all these awards and accolades coming his way. Second season, everybody knows what you're about, but still finding time to make a difference is just speaks volumes about the player that we have in our hands. So I would say those two are neck and neck. You can swap them around 1 and 2. I generally wouldn't mind. Number 3 is also quite an interesting race. I would say Nico Jackson for me is right there. We talked about him so much last season, but I do believe he's like the best under 23 forward now, center forward now in Europe, not just the Premier League. So I'm just looking forward to his evolution. If he can get 20 goals this season, like the fact that he does not take penalties, wow, like what a player we'll have on our hands. But he's already making his difference and his impact count, and that's the best that you can ask for. So those three, and honorary mention for Kukurea as well.
I think that is a good shout too. And then you do have people who are starting to nip at the heels in Nkunku, and as we talked about, Enzo Fernandez. So last kind of thoughts here, just kind of some quick predictions before we get out of here. I believe and I imagine that we were both predicting a Chelsea win. Again, I am never confident in a clean sheet, and so I'm going to guess that Tottenham do score a goal in this one. And I feel like, man, I would love to see us pummel them. Anthony Taylor is involved though, so you never know what's going to happen with that regard. I mean, it's essentially 12 versus 11. Give me 3-1 Chelsea. That's where I'm going to go.
Yeah, the same prediction. I mean, like you said, Anthony Taylor, you had to remind me. probably going to penalize Rob Sanchez for a handball, that kind of shit. But
he's gonna
yeah,
he's gonna
one.
touch the ball outside the box.
No, he's going to get like a penalty if he touches the ball inside the box. Like he might just come up with a ridiculous decision saying that's a penalty. I was like, dude, that's the goalkeeper. But yeah, genuinely, Anthony Taylor can get, oh my God, I have to keep like clean language, but oh, I hate him. But yeah, 1-3 would be my prediction as well. I would also like to go on a little bit of maybe, specific detail. I do think that East Bissouma is going to be either yellow or red carded. So maybe like
Wow.
one prediction there, one to keep an eye on. He's definitely going to be yellow carded, but let's see when. Uh, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a set piece goal. Um, I think I was crunching the numbers, and there's quite an interesting one that says that every time that they've had six or less shot on target, or they've had 1.5 non-penalty expected goals or less, they haven't won a Premier League game. So I'll say if they get less than six shots on target, or if they get less than 1.5 PXG, um, they lose. So that's my specific predictions for this week. Hopefully, I'll get like better than the five out of six that I did last week. But fingers crossed.
I'm gonna give you one. It's not necessarily. I don't know if I want to commit to the goal. Who scores a goal one, even though you're trying to press me on it. I'll give you a different one. If Pedro Neto starts in this game, he has registered a few assists over his time in games against Tottenham. I feel like if he starts, he will be crucial in the build up to at least one of the goals and register a wonderful assist. So how about that instead?
And that's very specific, and I love that. I think you're definitely like finding more confidence to make these calls, and I would actually like agree with it. I think Neto and Madueke would be very good money this game because I think that's where the threat comes from. So yeah, one definitely keep an eye on, and Neto in the form that he is, you can't bet against him.
Well, we hope to hear what your predictions are in our YouTube comments, in Discord, across our community here. If you hit us up on social as well. And look, we'll be enjoying the conversation after full time, after the match is over on YouTube Live for this one. So it will, I believe, be our last live of the year, considering that the holiday fixtures are starting to hit fast. And look, we need a little weekend to do some holiday shopping here. Sam's attending like 15 different weddings in the next couple of weeks. So it is a
I'm
busy
Indian.
time
What
at
can I
London is
do?
Blue. It is busy times at London is Blue HQ, but we're still going to be with you all holiday, celebrating hopefully some more Chelsea cheer as they hopefully again get the business done against Tottenham. It should be business as usual. Let's continue to return things to the normal order, stay in second place, push up on Liverpool, and make it a very, very fun title contention run this season. That's going to do it for this episode. So thank you so much for listening. And until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.